My name's Ryan.
My name's River.
We are b.creativ, and this is The Push. And today we're going over your branding and design is unsustainable,
Which is part 7 of our series 11 Sustainable Business Fails That Are Killing Your Business.
So River is our executive creative director, handles all things design. So I'm going to let him jump in. So when I say sustainable branding and design, what comes to your mind?
A few things come to my mind. The first thing that specifically comes to my mind, and probably that comes to everyone's mind, would be green design, right? The things that generally are sustainable within the design field, printing, materials, and things like that. Then when you get a little deeper into it, we go into the development side, the software, the hardware, the energy usage that comes along with those things. And then we get into something that's a little bit more abstract as far as the actual sustainability of the design for human perception. Is it visually sustainable? What's the shelf life? What's the burnout rate? How long is it going to be used versus how much have you invested into it, and what's the value there? Is it sustainable long term? Is it short term? Is it going to disappear? Is it ephemeral? Things like this. So those are the 3 main points.
Cool. Yeah, so that seems like 3 pretty big buckets. So why don't we take each one and kind of dive into it a little bit. So the first one you mentioned was kind of more around materials, sustainable printing. How are companies doing? How are they doing on that front these days? Or do you see a lot of people using sustainable printers and those type of things?
We've spent a lot of time doing research on this, right? And what we found is there's a very limited field for sustainable printing, sustainable materials in general, just because it's not the norm. It's a new field, it's an uninvested field, which makes it quite difficult and quite expensive at this point. So hopefully soon into the future, we'll see it, taking off like the vegan food industry, where we'll see big spikes and companies like Vistaprint will become sustainable. But if you're to take action and you're a small business owner or an executive who's making decisions for a company that has sustainable products and services, where you can start is obviously just with your general printed materials using FCS recycled paper and soy-based inks. These are kind of the 2 major fields right now.
So FCS is Forest Steward Council certified. So they're an organization that kind of deems a process of logging and paper creation to be sustainable. Another good one is 100% post-consumer recycled materials. So that is 100% recycled paper. And then he said the soy-based inks. So they're making printing inks from different vegetable oils and those type of things. And that's a little harder to find. So do what you can. Definitely start with the recycled paper and see if you can find a printer in your area that does the vegetable inks as well.
I think the next thing around that is the materials of the packaging and the total amount of the packaging as a whole. And so one of the main considerations when making any product or selling any product is to reduce the total amount of packaging necessary. How can I make this with the least amount of packaging as possible, the least amount of ink, and still get an effective design out the door? And then when you're taking it to the next step and you're doing the most, which is what everyone should be aiming for right now, is sustainable materials. So compostable packaging materials is basically what we want to be looking for. Recycled is good too, to some extent, but the more you can avoid waste as a whole and creating this regenerative cycle is really what we're looking for.
Totally. And a note on that, reducing your overall packaging. This is in your best interest as it should cut down on expense around packaging materials, having thinner boxes, less plastic and peanuts and those type of things in your shipments, reusable plates within your restaurants and cups within your coffee shops and stuff, all cuts down on more materials you have to purchase from your distributor and more things that can be reused. So it really helps your bottom line as well to kind of consider your minimalization of your packaging materials. And from a printing standpoint, having kind of an unobtrusive, clean design, it's a good look. You know, it's a minimal design with less ink will represent your business as a modern business. So it's good to, from a business perspective, do these things as well, not just because of the larger sustainability push, although that's obviously important as well.
I think just the last two things on this specific portion of this, to what you were saying, you can have cool design, right? That's green. That doesn't necessarily like scream green, you know? And I think brands sometimes kind of fear this, like, oh, I have to use cardboard with green ink because that's going to like be what visually appeals to consumers within this niche, when that's not necessarily true. And I think a great example of this would be Swiss Design. Swiss Design has done a really good job as a whole design community implementing kind of cool, like minimalist, really dope designs just across all their consumer product goods and things like that. And so it's just a good example, you know, that you can still have cool design, you can still look like Red Bull, but you can be sustainable. And then the next part is just to be careful of greenwashing, right? And so we see companies like, for example, Crest, and you walk down the aisle and you'll see, you know, a toothpaste tube in a box, which is completely unnecessary. You don't need the box, right? And then the box will say something like 30% less packaging, you know, and so they've reduced the size of the exterior packaging by 30%, but this is just, they haven't really done anything, you know? And so this is what we would call greenwashing, where they're just trying to convince people that you're doing good by purchasing this thing that has 30% less packaging, when in the end it's something they should have done from the start anyways, and they're still doing something that's not essentially correct.
Or it's a plastic package, and it could be you know, a paper-based recycled package.
Yeah. Non-recycled package,
Right.
using toxic inks,
Totally.
you know, in facilities that are inhumanely treating its employees, you know, and so it's like, just because you did 30% less of the cardboard box doesn't mean that you're actually doing anything sustainable. So just, you know, keep an eye out for those things so that you're not deceived through greenwash marketing techniques.
Sure. Okay, so then moving to the second bucket, kind of the distribution mechanism, the technology, etc. What would you say, just to dive into that? You said websites and etc. What is there a little bit more you could share there?
Yeah, definitely. And I think you're the techie of the two of us, so I'll pass this back off to you in a second. But the main thing is just the amount of data that you take up as compared to the amount of energy that you're using for that. So if I make a million different assets, right, and I create 50 gigabytes of data that's stored on a cloud somewhere, and then I only use 10 kilobytes of storage to flight this across all of our social media or whatever, and then we have all this extra data sitting out there essentially poisoning the system, and it takes energy to store that in the long term. Other things that go into it as far as like the color of your website. We've learned that the dark interfaces take actually less energy on your computer and on your systems to run than a white interface. And so there's little things within that. But I think as far as what we've done, implementing different servers across the country, cloud-based storage and things like that, I think you can speak a little bit more to how we've done, like taken our sustainable push within that framework.
Sure. And just to note on what you said, if you can run a campaign off 10 KB, then you're an alien out in the future or something. 10 megabytes would even be insanely impressive. That's probably, you know, if you can keep a video under 10 megabytes, then good on you. But yeah, for sure, it's good to be mindful of what you're using. And so many of us have these cloud storage facilities, or I should say drives, with folders with gigabytes and gigabytes, terabytes of data that we are not using, and that we have an attachment to. So We won't get into the spiritual side of purging right now, but it can be good for yourself as well to kind of clear out some of that data, because that data is sitting out on a server and taking energy to live. So it's important to make sure we're cleansing out our folders and getting rid of like unnecessary stuff, and you'll feel lighter after doing so. So that's really important. So what we focus on at b.creativ when we create web assets is hosting them sustainably at a minimum. And there are a couple different options here where you can, among the different major providers, host your stuff in a place that is run on completely green energy, wind energy, solar energy. So one of the things we do is we use a lot of AWS and Amazon web services. So I host all of our stuff in the Oregon, US West 2 region, because it is run completely on wind and solar energy. And it's a really easy thing. Once you make the decision, oh, this is the right place to host it, then you push everything there, and it's literally just one configuration away from the unsustainable version of that. So that's something that if you are running in the cloud, you can talk to your provider, just do a little research to see where their sustainable region is and just move your stuff over there. And that's really good for the larger picture as well, because when they see more and more people choosing to host their stuff in the sustainable region, they're going to expand that because they see the business need there. So, and then a little bit about what River talked about, cutting down on the usage of data through making meaningful choices as far as colors and images and video and pictures. And in today's day and age, it's really good to use video because of the dynamic aspect of it. We're kind of trained now to want video. Pictures kind of seem static. And that's okay. That's okay, because it gives us an opportunity to really share who we are and what we're doing through the power of video. Just be conscious of, your file sizes. Get that thing down. It doesn't need to be 4K video on your website to properly relay the message that you're trying to relay. Not to mention, it won't be a good experience for people visiting your website because it'll take forever to load and those type of things. So it's in your best interest to compress those files and get them down. And it's really just being meaningful about your data usage and files. So every single time someone loads a website, all of those assets travel out of the data center up to space, come back down, and all of that takes energy. If you can have a very small footprint site, then that allows you, every single time your web page gets loaded from any one of your customers, partners, investors, you have contributed to less data usage and thus a more sustainable approach by keeping that website footprint small. And we really work really hard, and have developed a bunch of techniques to do that at b.creativ, so that all of our websites are kind of 100% carbon neutral. And we kind of try to take it a level beyond that to just make sure that we're being thoughtful with the way we design things.
The other benefit of that is that, one part, you're being sustainable, so that's like a cool thing for yourself. But Google rankings and Bing and search engines base part of your search engine optimization rating on load speed. Mm-hmm. So the faster your page loads, the more effort that you put into this kind of digital infrastructure of being fast and small and nimble and effective, you're going to be ranked higher, and you're going to get better results, better click-through rates, better visibility. And so it's not just, hey, do this to be sustainable. It's do it because it's the right thing to do, but also because it's going to significantly benefit and impact your business positively.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, okay, then jumping into the third aspect, the more abstract, this is a really cool and different way of thinking about it. Sustainable design from a visually sustainable perspective. We have talked to design agencies around the world that haven't even thought of this type of approach. So it's a really thoughtful and really on the forefront this type of philosophy around design. So Riv, can you jump into that a little bit for us?
Yeah, definitely. So basically what we mean when we talk about visual sustainability is how long can a human being perceive one of these assets? How can we visually intake that and look at it for an extended period of time? And how long can we feel comfortable looking at that before we're annoyed or before our eyes begin to feel fatigue, right? Is the color obnoxious? Is it painful? Or is it inviting and welcoming, and will it last for a significant amount of time? And so we can take, a page out of the books of many successful businesses to see, for example, the evolution of the Apple logo over time. The very first one that Steve Jobs did was an etching of, I think, Newton under the tree with the apple in his hand. And so this was a very intricate, beautiful piece, of artwork, but not necessarily a sustainable visual element that would be placed on the back of your phone and on the back of computers and all over these different products that they've created over time. And then they move forward into the rainbow apple, which is nice because they consolidated and moved into this apple icon. But the rainbow wasn't necessarily something that was visually appealing over a long period of time. I look at this thing, and the colors are somewhat abrasive after 20 minutes. And I'm not saying everyone's going to be staring at 20 minutes, but when you're sitting on the side of the highway, deadlock traffic in LA, and there's an Apple billboard on the side, the one that you're going to enjoy looking at is, the iPhone 10 that has the kind of like weird Jupiter image on it that's just like abstractly beautiful, but also subtly soft, that you can view for a long time, right? Not something that's bright lime green with abrasive text, which can get your attention, right? And there can be a place for something from an ephemeral standpoint of, boom, get it here. But if you were trying to do a long-term brand identity, it's better to invest in something that's visually comfortable for people to look at, which is why I think Apple eventually moved into the black and white Apple iconography, and we can see similar things over time, even with Google. The original font that they used was a little bit thinner, and not as visually apparent. And also right now, even with the color that Google has, you can see the functioning of this, where it gets your attention real quick, but then no one stays on the Google search page for an extended amount of time, right? So it plays into their role under their brand design of like, okay, the visual sustainability of this logo is not a super long period of time, but it's recognizable in this short period within this interface and this user experience, where I come in, I see it, I type, and then I go. And over time, they've even implemented where they have the artist come in and draw the Google logo. So every time you come to the page, it's uniquely designed. And that's their push for creating visual sustainability around the logo.
That's a good lead into advertising and branding as art. So they are creating art through the Google landing page, and the Google Doodle is what it's called. By creating assets that you share that are advertising pieces for your business as art and pieces of art, you're really adding value to the user who's viewing that. And when something is artful, it is highly visually sustainable. You are drawn to looking at it for a long amount of time. And it allows a company to establish a stronger relationship with its customers and not just be taking. I want your attention to buy my product, but I'm giving you something of value that you enjoy looking at in return for your attention on my product or service. So we really try to take an artful approach to our asset building so that they're fun and unique and interesting and exciting to look at, and that inherently makes them sustainable from a visual perspective.
Absolutely. No one sat on the subway and looked at a Verizon 2-for-$1 $99 poster and said, wow, like I want to take this off the train and put it in my room because it's so beautiful and cool and artistic. It's an insult to everyone who rides on the train to have to be visually bothered by something so disgustingly atrocious. Have you ever sat on the train and looked at the poster and said, wow, I'm getting off at the next stop and I'm going to Verizon and I'm changing my phone plan right this second so that I can get 2 phones and pay $99 a month.
And I appreciate that ad for being there.
Yeah.
Never.
Did so much to
Yeah.
benefit my life. It's not how it works, you know, but if we saw something that was relevant, you know, a socially responsible piece of art where, you know, they took the time to think about what was happening within society and said, for example, the Black Lives Matter movement, you know, if they took time to do something where they used it as an educational platform, right? They have 200,000 spots over the New York Metro, and they decide to make a series of posters that educate people on what it is to be a racist and what it is to be an anti-racist, and then spread this across all these resources without necessarily pushing a 2 for $99 special or whatever. Now all of a sudden people look at this and they're retaining this information and they're looking at it for a longer time, and then it's like a sponsored by Verizon thing or AT&T or whatever, and now all of a sudden it's like, wow, I kind of have a little bit more respect for this mega corporation because they've gone out of their way to help society grow positively by essentially creating this piece of art that I could take off of the Metro. I could essentially say, like, I like this so much, I'm going to actually steal this poster from the Metro and put it in my room because it has that much value. And that's really where you want to be from a visual sustainability point of view is will someone want to take this? Will someone want to watch this over and over again? When I'm having a party with my friends in the room, can I just like put on the Alter Eco like sustainable chocolate channel and just let it play in the background because they have such cool animations and cool visual effects and things like that that's going on, where it's almost like not there but something interesting, you know? And if it's not that, then what are you really doing? You're just pumping meaningless, unsustainable, ephemeral content into the ether.
You're being selfish. It's a selfish approach where you can really, if you do add value with your advertising, man, the effects can be amazing. You know, there's Nike commercials that I've watched multiple times on YouTube because they're just so cool and fun and funny. You know, a lot of those campaigns are done really, really well. So yeah, just really try to add value with the way that you're advertising yourself. And that's probably one of the main gateways into creating sustainable visuals that can be enjoyed over the long term. And your customers will certainly appreciate it. So just to recap here, we're talking about sustainable design and sustainable branding. We went through how you can use sustainable materials and sustainable packaging, approaches to cut down on packaging. We've gone through how you can use your distribution channels from a sustainable perspective, sustainable websites and technology. And then we've talked about how you can really create sustainable visuals to add value to your customers and potential customers in a way that, you know, enriches their life. So if you need help with any of these things, we're always stoked to talk about it. At b.creativ, we focus on sustainable design, sustainable websites. It's our passion. We like creating things. So hit us up. If you want to create cool, sustainable visuals to advertise your brand, to add value, check out our product, The Content Jaguar. We're really pumped about it. And we'll see you on the next one.
Catch you later.
Cheers. Thanks.